Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In this video, I would love to share with you my recent scientific research on the Quran mapping of the brain. And even though the word brain, which in Arabic language is mukh, is not used in the Quran mentions the function, the higher function, and focuses more on the higher functions of the brain. The Quran uses different vocabularies to refer to the mind, and each word can be traced not only to a function, but also to an area in the brain that is correlated with that function. In this research, I started by examining the different vocabulary used in the Quran to refer to the mind. And I found out that not only do the words reveal specific functions, but also they reveal shapes, which resembles areas in the brain. Such a revelation made it easy to link them to the corresponding parts in the brain based on recent scientific studies. The research shows the accuracy of the Quranic vocabulary, which strengthens our faith and helps us understand the higher functions of the mind and how to use our God's given gifts. So the first vocabulary used in the Quran is the word al-fu'ad, and it is usually used in its plural tense, Af'idah in Arabic language, and it comes from the Arabic root verb fa'idah, which means to affect the heart, something that affects the heart. In the Arabic language, the word fu'ad is used to refer to both the heart and the brain, which I found it strange why it refers to both. But when I looked at the word uf'ud, which is a derivative from the same root verb that the word fu'ad comes from, I found it means a container in which food is grilled or cooked. So therefore, I proposed that al-fu'ad corresponds not only to the brain, but to the brain connection to the heart, the brain and its connection to the heart through the brain stem. The brain is the container of the human subjective experience, self-awareness, and knowledge. All the knowledge is cooked inside the brain, just as food is cooked inside al-uf'ud. The brain consisted of the cerebellum and the cerebellum and the brain stem, which connects it to the heart. The brain is connected to the heart via the spinal cord, which is located in the brain stem. The brain and the heart exchange signals and communicate with one another, constituting what we call al-fu'ad in Arabic language, which is mentioned in the Quran. Al-lub, another word mentioned in the Quran, usually in a plural term. And why in a plural term? Because there is one lobe, which means kernel or bulb or core. There is one lobe in each of the hemispheres. That is why it is mentioned in its plural tense often in the Quran. This word should be appropriately translated as the core. You usually don't get this in English because they often translated those who have understanding, those who have reflections. So they try to translate it, but I like to translate it as core intelligence because it refers to the deepest area in our brain, which holds, or it's a container of our essence. So it corresponds to the insular cortex in modern days medical terminology. It is responsible for bodily self-awareness, subjective experience, pain, and emotional feelings such as love, anger, fear, sadness, happiness, sexual arousal, disgust, aversion, unfairness, inequality, uncertainty, disbelief, social exclusion, trust, empathy, and beauty. And in my research, I explore how the word is used in the Quran with different ayat, and the ayat would cover all of these functions. That's why it's amazing. Scientists also linked the insular cortex to experiencing a state of union with God. So this is the core essence when you are experiencing the presence of Allah and have an experience of fana, annihilation in Allah, in your consciousness of Allah, then this is the area that is active in your brain. But it is also subjected to hallucination. So people who sometimes see visions, but it's coming from their own ego and so forth, this area is also active in the brain because it has to be connected with other areas in the brain to give you a genuine, authentic experience. Otherwise, it is just a hallucination. Because it is responsible for bodily self-awareness and subjective experience, it contains the essence of the soul, nafs in Arabic language, the essence of the individual self. We should make a distinction here between the soul, which is nafs, and the ruh, the spirit. Because a ruh is located in the heart and it is the mystery of life, while nafs is the individual soul created out of experience, memories, and action. But without the secret of life, without the body being alive, there is no nafs created. There is nothing in the body. But when the secret of life, which is ruh, is in the body, then the soul have consciousness and the soul starts to form, accumulate experience, and accumulate knowledge and feelings and so forth. But the amazing thing, if you look at the figure, that it is the deepest area, it's the core. And that is what the Quran describes it. It is even a better word to describe this area in the brain than just saying the insular cortex. Habl al-Warid is the brainstem, is the other third area of the al-Fuad, which connects it to the heart. The phrase is mentioned only once in the Quran, in Ayah 50, in Surah 50, Ayah 16. It comes from the Arabic root verb warada, which means to arrive at a well or a place. Habl al-Warid is often translated as the jugular vein, but it could be referring actually to the spinal cord, in my view, because the spinal cord is an input-output cord. Just as when you go to a well and you get to take water from it. So it's an input-output place. This understanding would be more accurate because the word habl in Arabic language means rope or wire, cord or cable. And the word warid means vein. That is a tube that circulates input and output to a certain location. The brainstem is an essential part of the brain. It connects the brain to the body, and it contains the spinal cord. And so it connects the body to the external world as well. The brainstem also plays a vital role in the regulation of cardiac and respiratory function. It also regulates the central nervous system and is vital in maintaining consciousness and regulating the sleep cycle. Nasiyah is another vocabulary used to refer to the mind in the Quran. It is mentioned twice in the Quran, in Surah 96, 15, and 16. It comes from the root verb nassa, which means to realize, to elevate, to make something manifest, to refer, to put things on top of one another, to deduce, to move something, to urge, to decree something. Literally, it means the forelook, but it also means a place or angle where two or more sides or edges meet. An appropriate translation for the word would be the frontal area, where all sides of the brain meet. It corresponds to the prefrontal cortex, using modern medical terminology. The prefrontal cortex connects with much of the brain areas, including extensive connection with the other cortical and subcortical and brainstem sites. It is responsible for emotional regulations, making choices, and the feeling of guilt and remorse, which the Quran ayat refer to. It connects it to the feeling of guilt and remorse. It also can represent information not currently in the environment. That's why we feel remorse, because remorse is a subjective experience. The prefrontal cortex also plays a role in the inhibition of inappropriate thoughts, distractions, actions, and feelings. The third vocabulary, or the fourth, I think, vocabulary mentioned in the Quran to refer to the mind or the higher function of the brain is al-hijr. This word is mentioned in Quran 89:5. It comes from the Arabic root verb hajira, which means to prevent. The word is used to refer to the mind, but it also means a C-shaped barrier. Just as Hijr Ismail, if you look at the figure of the Kaaba and there is this yellow C-shaped wall, it is called Hijr Ismail. It is called Hijr because it's a C-shaped barrier. And so the word Hijr means C-shaped barrier that prevents something. Therefore, a more appropriate translation for the word would be a preventative C-shaped barrier. Therefore, I propose that al-hijr corresponds to the C-shaped caudate nucleus. Why? Because the caudate nucleus is part of our inhibitory system, and it is a C-shape, just as the Quran refers to it. Using modern medical terminology, this area is called caudate nucleus. The caudate nucleus is one of the parts that play an inhibitory function. Just as al-hijr prevents something from something else. And Allah refers to this specific area in the surah to talk to us. Don't you have this capacity? Didn't I gifted you with this capacity to be able to prevent yourself from inappropriate behavior and to feel the remorse if you don't through the other areas that is responsible for that? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to everything in an accurate way because He's the creator of the human being. And Nuha is another word mentioned in the Quran to refer to the mind. This word is mentioned 3 times in the Quran. And as I said, you're not going to see it clearly in the English translation because they usually just say, isn't this sign for those who have understanding, for those who can understand, for those who can reflect? So they don't get the subtleties of the different words used to refer to our understanding, our capacity to understand and control our choices, our behavior, and to feel the consequences of our action. But the Quran accurately refers to these shapes and functions inside our brain. So the word Nuha is mentioned also in its plural tense in the Quran because there is one in each hemisphere, and is mentioned 3 times in Quran 254 and 20, 128 and 79:40. It comes from the Arabic root verb naha, which means to prohibit or to inhibit. The word is often used to refer to the mind, but it also means the top thick area of a steak, watad in Arabic language. Al-watad in Arabic is a wooden wedge, thick on top and thinner on the bottom. And it was used to ground and destabilize tents. Therefore, a more appropriate translation for the word Nuha, rather than just saying people who have understanding, would be people who have a grounding and stabilizing inhibitor capacity in their brain. And I propose this area corresponds to the subthalamic nucleus in the brain. Why? Because it exactly looks like a watad, like a steak, and it acts as a switch to inhibit or prohibit us from also acting inappropriately. And this is how the Quran connect the word Nuha, which is the plural of Nuhya, to things that we have a capacity to do, to inhibit or to prohibit ourselves from acting inappropriately. And that is what is amazing, that the Quran is very accurate in referring to these areas in the brain. Al-qalb is another vocabulary used to refer to our capacity to see and to choose and so forth. So how is the heart is doing that? Because it is connected to the brain, and the heart comes or is directly connected to the autonomic nervous system. So it is not under our choice, our control, but is it between Allah's merciful hands, as the Prophet ﷺ said. It means that Allah turns the heart to this way or that way, because it comes from the root verb qalaba, which is to turn. And how the heart turns? The heart turns because it is under Allah's control. So, for example, if you are in a state of fear, you don't tell your heart to get fast. It does that for you automatically. If you're angry, the heart will also act in a certain way. If you are in danger, if you are sad, if you are in peace, the heart rate will be low, and the blood pressure will be normal, and so forth. So the heart is under Allah's control, and it tells you something about your state of being. It does not lie. The mind can lie and can get confused because it has the free will and it has previous experiences and so forth. But the heart is purely connected to nature. It will connected to your fitra, to your innate nature, and it acts in its own. But it receives signals from the amygdala, from the brain, and exchange signals with the brain through the brain, the spinal cord in the brainstem, as I said before, but it connects to the amygdala, which is responsible for the flight or fight response. And the heart will tell you what you need to do and what is your state. If you find your heart rate is fast and there is no danger, for example, but you're angry about something maybe you shouldn't be angry about, that means you need to slow down, because your heart's saying, I'm getting fast, I am getting exhausted. So it means to slow down and to try to make wudu or make zikr and calm down. But if you are in true danger, so the heart fast, to supply you with the blood, you need to run and to save yourself from the danger. So the heart authentically informs us of our inner state, as it automatically reacts to what we feel and encounter. The heart also sends signals back to the brain, and that's why the mind needs to follow the heart. The Quran mapping of the brain is based on the previously mentioned vocabulary. We can draw from the Quran a map for the higher function responsible for cognition, or for the mind, the higher mind. The lower mind is responsible for eating and drinking and breathing and all of that, but there is that is the lower brain. The higher brain is the one that can deduce principles and concepts and metaphysical concepts and understanding and decide choices based on feelings and past experiences and knowledge. In the following chapter, in my research, I elaborate more on al-fu'ad with all of its several parts that mentioned earlier, but this higher brain is responsible for three functions. Self-awareness area, or has three areas. The self-awareness area, the inhibitory area, and the heart-brain interconnectedness. That what forms the higher mind, and that what we should be aware of in order to make sound choices, learn from mistakes, and deduce deep knowledge of the truth of who we are, so we can know ourselves, and through that, knowing Allah, our masterful nurturer and our creator. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.